Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nee-Nee, and this is Suspicious Minds. On here, I talk about true crime, whether it's solved or unsolved. I look at disappearances, and then I talk about just generally creepy stuff. I have to warn you that this video contains horrifying information, horrific details, and graphic information. So if you are faint at heart, please do not continue watching this video. Before we start with the case, I also want to remind you that I will never glorify any of these criminal acts, and that I share this information so that we can be sure to recognize this in other people and protect ourselves and our loved ones from this happening to us. Now, you know how I've been saying that we'll still get to the creepy stuff. Well, this video is it. If ever the word creepy had a person as a definition, it will definitely be Brian Stephen Smith. He is creepy as anything you've ever met in your life before. So we are going to look today at how Brian Stephen Smith, a seemingly normal South African, moved to Anchorage, became a serial killer, and almost got away with it if it wasn't for one brave woman who stood up against him. And this is the case, what the media called the SD card killer. The year is 2019. So we've been to 2019 before, I think in two previous cases, but let's just look at it from another point of view. So in 2019, Post Malone was the biggest selling music artist. He had the most hits on the Billboard 100, and he was the most streamed artist on Spotify. At the cinemas, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was the highest grossing actor with Jumanji Next Level and Fast and the Furious, I don't know how manyth one in the series. So that was two of the biggest box office hits of the year. In April of 2019, a fire almost destroyed the Notre Dame in Paris. And also in 2019, a horrific attack on a mosque took place. And not only was the mosque attacked, but the white supremacist who did the attack live streamed what he did. And it left 51 people dead. Another crime that took place in Anchorage in Alaska, when a father, and I'm just going to read you his name was Tylen Lee Culane Fillet, shot his 30-year-old wife Cecilia dead in front of their 13-year-old daughter Nevia. But he didn't stop there. He packed Cecilia's body into the car, he put his daughter in the car with him, and they drove around for hours with the dead body of his daughter's mother in the car. In the morning hours, he forced the child to fill up a can with fuel at a gas station. He took her body and the child to a parking lot. He shot his child in the head and set the car alight. Later on, he pled guilty to second-degree murder, but luckily he was sent to jail for 100 years. The case, as I mentioned earlier, also took place in Anchorage in 2019, and it started when Valerie Kessler, an unhomed woman, was standing outside a convenience store at about midnight, and this was in the middle of September, and and a guy pulled up in a truck next to her and asked her if she wanted to take a ride with him. Valerie wanted to get out of the rain, and she said yes, sure, and she got in the truck and the two of them drove around. She has seen this guy before, but she didn't know him. And she later described him as a very friendly man. He was friendly, they were making jokes, he was very cordial with her. And she said that it was so interesting to talk with him because he had an interesting accent. The two of them drove around for hours after midnight, and at about 5 a.m. they stopped at a convenience store. The guy got out, he went to buy some snacks and something to drink, and it was then when Valerie dropped her phone, keeping in mind she was sitting in the passenger seat in front. And when she reached down to pick up her phone, she felt a second phone. Valerie later described that when she touched that phone, it was as if a chill went up her spine just by touching the phone. And she, in an instant, decided that she was going to take that phone. So she picked up her phone and the other phone and put both in her bag before the man returned to the car. When he returned, he gave her some snacks and something to drink, and they drove along. She said at some time during the night they went to the airport, watched the planes depart and arrive, and she had a very nice evening or morning with this man, and he dropped her off at the same place where he picked her up. Now, it's not known whether something happened between the two, but Valerie's, would I say, occupation was a lady of the night. So Valerie, being unhomed, lived in a tent that was supplied by the government, and she went back to her tent to just get some sleep because she was up all night. She said that this phone was burning in her mind, and she thought she was going to open the phone because when she took the phone, she just generally thought she was going to sell it for money. But now in the tent, she was laying down and she thought, let me see if maybe this guy knows people that I know. So she opened the phone, looked at the numbers, and then she didn't really see anyone that she recognized, and she decided that she was going to look at the pictures that this man had on his phone. And I think that's a very natural thing to do. If I would pick up a phone, I would also go to the contacts and then I would maybe scroll to the pictures, being a curious person myself. But what Valerie saw was not only life-changing, but also something that has truly scarred her for the rest of her life, as if she wasn't scarred enough, because this person was really living a very difficult life. Valerie saw something so shocking that nobody should ever see, and we're going to get to that later, to what was on this phone. And Valerie knew that this had to be reported to the police. But she had a dilemma because she stole this phone, and that already would influence the police in not believing her. They would immediately think, oh well, you stole this phone, we're not even going to listen to you further. And that is when Valerie came up with a brilliant plan that she is being called a hero for what she had done. She had taken a memory card or an SD card, and she transferred all the information onto this card, or what was in that folder that this man had on his phone. And on the card she wrote the title that was in the phone. And she went to the police station. Another thing is she waited for weeks because she was so scared that this man would see her, because she thought that by now he would have known that she took the phone. And what she saw on that phone, she feared for her life. So it took her about 2 weeks to finally get the courage to go to the police station. And when she arrived at the police station, Detective Brendan Lee was on duty. And part of her brilliant plan was that she said that she was walking past the Midtown Marriott Hotel and she picked up this SD card. And the title is very ominous, and she thought that she have to give this in at the police. And when Detective Brendan Lee looked at this title, I can only think that a chill went down his spine as well, because the title on the card was Homicide at Midtown Marriott Hotel. Detective Brendan Lee was intrigued by this title, and he called another detective over, and they went to look for a computer where they could put in this SD card. They found it, and they saw that there were 39 photos and 12 videos on this card. Now I have to warn you that this is where things get really graphic. So again, if you are very sensitive, you should not listen to this. The video showed the inside of a hotel room, and it showed the badly beaten body of a woman lying on the floor. Her hands were tied and she was completely naked, but she was badly abused and damaged. Then the video was narrated by a man, and not any man, a man with a very strange accent. And this man was acting as if he was the producer of a film, and he was saying things to her, he was swearing at her, he was cursing, he was laughing at her at times. And then at a stage he would choke her until she would lose consciousness. He would take away his hands from her throat. He would do that multiple times, and then he would say, "You live, you die. You live, you die," in a nursery rhyme kind of way. And he would say things like, "You effing bitch, why don't you want to die? You need to know when to die. You need to know your place." I can just imagine that those two policemen were speechless. By this time, Valerie was gone. She just gave that card and she went back to her tent. Besides all the horror that they saw was this accent. It was not an Anchorage person. It wasn't an American. It wasn't a Canadian. They realized that this is a very distinct accent. It's just amazing that another detective walked past this room where they were listening to this video, and this detective says, "Hey, I know that guy. I know that accent." And Detective Lee was like, "How do you know this person?" This is also why it's such a shocking case, is because of how this detective knew about this man with this very strange accent. About a year before the SD card was handed in at the police station, a lady called the Crime Stoppers type of tip line, and she didn't want to give her name, but she said that she was having an affair with a married man, and therefore she doesn't want to give her name. She's a mother of 4 kids, and she works with this person. They work at the Marriott Hotel. Why she called in is because this boyfriend of hers or lover of hers had told her that he had murdered a woman in Anchorage, and that she is very scared of him, and she wanted to report this to the police. The police warmed up to this caller, and eventually she came in, and she was identified as Alicia Youngblood. Now, Alicia, as she said, worked with Brian Smith, and it was then established that when they started their affair, they were both dabbling with BDSM type of encounters with each other, and they tried to make each encounter more violent, but to a point where both of them were consenting to it. And it ended up with them sending messages to each other about violence and sexual assault to get them both excited. And it was in one of these messages that Brian had said to Alicia, "I had killed a woman before." And he gave such graphic details and specific details that she had no doubt in her mind that he was telling the truth. He also told her that he takes videos of all the women he kills. She was deathly scared of this man. So the police asked her to get evidence, and she really tried to get evidence. She recorded conversations. She tried to entice him to send these videos to her. But after a few months, she just said, "I cannot do this anymore. He's expecting more and more of me. I am done. I cannot do this." And Alicia then actually moved from Anchorage to Oklahoma with her 4 kids. She was done. She wanted to get so far away from this man as possible. And the police then did nothing. They did nothing. They thought, well, we couldn't get any evidence. It was probably just a sexual game. She probably took it too serious. But then we're back in the police station, and this detective hears the accent, and he says, "I know exactly who that is. His name is Brian Smith, and he is from South Africa. And he works at the Marriott, and he is married." Yes, he's married. So the police found out that Brian Smith and his lovely wife, they were on a trip to Washington, D.C., and they are returning very soon. So in the meantime, while they were in Washington, D.C., the police got all the search warrants and everything in place. And that is when Brian and his wife arrived at the Anchorage airport. That Detective Brendan Lee and his partner met Brian Smith at the airport. It was obvious that Brian Smith was living a double life. And the reason for that is that what they saw on the SD card, what Alicia Youngblood had told them before the search warrant, they investigated and they found that this man was living in this beautiful home with his wife that's 20 years older than him, and they were just this normal looking couple. So let's just go back a little bit and find out, who is Brian Stephen Smith? Now, Brian grew up in South Africa in Queenstown. It's now named Kumani. He grew up there, and his family said he was always a very quiet child. He never had a lot of friends. He was an intelligent child. I think he lost that somewhere along the line, because he really doesn't sound very intelligent to me now. And that he was always very comfortable and more at ease in front of a computer than with their family when they had family events. The people that worked with him in South Africa also said that he was a strange guy. He gave off a very strange vibe, and that is exactly what I got from the first video that I saw from him, the interview. He's a very strange person. You can seriously see that there's something wrong with this man. Now, in 2013, he apparently also couldn't keep a job. Brian drifted from the one position to the other. He was in IT positions, but he also managed guest houses. But he would then, after hours or weekends, he'll be playing online games. And in 2013, he met his future wife, Stephanie Bisland, online. She was also playing the same game, and they started chatting offline. Their love blossomed, and Stephanie was 20 years older than him. And while they now built on this relationship, it was later in 2013 that Brian then proposed to her over Skype. I couldn't find any information to say whether Brian was married before, but to all people it seemed like he was very in love with Stephanie, and that Stephanie was very in love with Brian as well. And I think she really loved him, and you'll see why I say that also later. Stephanie then came to South Africa in 2014. They got married, and they then decided that they're not going to live in South Africa. Later on, Brian said it's because his business deal went south and he didn't have any money, so he thought, let's start new. And so they both went over to Alaska, and that is where their new life started. So Stephanie is a musician, and she traveled a lot. She was working with her band, not always at home, and this was ideal for Brian. And then Brian worked at the Marriott Hotel. Before we get to the interview that the police had when they were waiting for him there at the airport, it's a stunning video, you can really watch it. He was caught off guard. He thought he was never going to get caught. I want to tell you what they found at his home, because they were doing this at the same time. I'm just going to read some of it while I'm telling you. They found a black Adidas bag that included latex gloves, duct tape, and garbage bags. They also found 2 homemade silencers at his home, and they found dozens of digital devices, SD cards, digital cameras, 10 phones. They say some were smartphones, some were the burner phones, USB drives, they call it thumb drives, thousands and thousands and thousands of pornography, violent images, and so on. They recovered laptops, cameras, and one of his favorite items, a GoPro camera. When he arrived in Alaska, for example, he started his own YouTube channel to show how a South African is living in Alaska, and he uses his GoPro there, but he also used that GoPro in his horrible movies that he made of women dying that he killed. So when they confronted him about all this SD cards and phones, and why does a normal person have 10 phones, he said that as a side gig he is selling it on eBay, and he makes extra money of it. Not very convincing, but hey, that was his story. So we are now at the airport where he was caught off guard by the police. They have in the meantime established that the victim in the video was Kathleen Jo Henry, and she was also an unhoused woman. She was not a lady of the night. She was actually just out of luck on life. She had an addiction problem, and he must have taken a chance promising her something that definitely didn't come true. So they realized that Kathleen Jo Henry was the victim, and they had photographs of her. They were ready in the room. There's also a footage camera in the interview room, and they confronted Brian Smith with these images, also stills from the video, and he didn't seem very fazed. So for 2 hours he just kept on saying, I can't remember, I don't know, if I did that, that's horrible. No, I didn't do that. No, I can't remember doing that. So he just kept on saying that. And there's actually such an ironic piece of the interview where they had taken a still of the shoes of the person holding the camera, because he also made sure that his face never showed anywhere. The picture of the shoes, the detective Lee asks him, Brian, do you know these shoes? And he looks at the shoes and he says, no, I've never seen them before. And then the detective looks down at the ground and he says, but Brian, you are wearing them today. And each lie that he told them, they reeled him in and they said, but what about this? They had evidence of everything that he was trying to deny. And after 2 hours, he started to reveal little bits of information, and it was a little bit of everything. He didn't fully go out and say, yes, I did A, B, and C. What he admitted about Kathleen Jo Henry was that, yes, he had taken her to the Marriott Hotel. They even had evidence that he booked them into the hotel, as in process-wise. He put his name on one of the rooms. And that's why I said he's not very intelligent. So he took Kathleen Henry to the room. He assaulted her. He did everything unimaginable to this woman. He confessed. He said, yes, I killed her. Also, again, now this is something very sensitive, is that at some stage in the video, he stands with his shoes on her throat and just swears at her. So he said, yes, I did that. I'm such a terrible person. I did that. And the police just tried to contain themselves. They said to him that we are going to just get all the paperwork ready. And when they got up, something very strange happened. Again, how strange this man is. He said to them, do you really have to go now? And the other detective, not Detective Lee, said, we don't have to go anywhere. We've got the whole night. And Detective Lee asked him, but why? Why do you want us to stay? And Brian Smith said, well, I killed somebody else as well, and I can tell you about her. And he was proud of saying that, sit down, I'm going to tell you something else. Again, you can just see how the police had to contain themselves because they could not believe what this man was telling them. So he told them that almost a year before, his wife was out of town, and he had the habit, whether she was at home or out of town, at 12 o'clock or so he'll have a whiskey, and if he doesn't fall asleep, he'll get in his truck and he'll drive around in town. Now, number one, that is very suspicious. If my husband would get up every night after 12, get in his car and drive around and come home at 6 in the morning, I would be very suspicious and concerned. Stephanie wasn't. Stephanie was so surprised about all of this. It was the biggest surprise to her. He said so that specific night he did that as well. He drove around and he saw Veronica Abouchuk standing at a corner. Veronica, again, she wasn't a lady of the night. She was down on her luck. The last Facebook post that she made was that I really have to get my life together. I want to do this for my children. She's got beautiful grown children. They love their mother. But again, she had addiction problems. And he said to her, do you want a clean place, a clean bed, and a warm meal for the night? And of course she said yes. And she got in the car and he took her home. When they got to their home, this is his wife's home, where he is graciously allowed to stay, where his wife stayed before he came to Anchorage. So he took this unhoused woman to his wife's home, and he then realized that she smells very bad because she is a homeless person. She doesn't have plumbing and running water and all of those things every day. And he thought that his wife is for sure going to smell this woman when she comes back. This is what he tells the police. Very calm. Actually, I'm getting emotional about it, but he told it as if the way you explain to somebody how to make a latte. He says to the police that he said to her, please go and shower. And Veronica said, no, I don't want to shower. And he says, go and shower. And she says, no, I'm not going to shower. He then gets up, goes to the garage, and then he gets his firearm. He says it's a tiny little thing that he got, walks into the living room and kills Veronica because she doesn't want to take a shower. What he did then, and that is another part of this case that is so shocking, is he sends a picture of Veronica's body to a guy by the name of Ian Calhoun, who is also a musician, a young guy. He looks younger than Brian Smith. He sends a picture to him and something to the effect of, "Look what I've done." He says, "Oops, look what I have done." Him and Ian then have a conversation back and forth about this body. Brian then keeps Veronica's body in his truck for a few days and dumps it next to the railroad. Her body is found with the bullet, but it remains unsolved. And both Veronica and Kathleen Jo Henry were Native American indigenous people. As I understand it, there's a lot of missing people who are indigenous, and there is a massive problem with not finding and not effort into finding these missing people. When he dumps the body, a month before his interrogation at the airport, that body was found. Exactly what he told the police where the body should be. He didn't know it was found, but the police knew that a month before, Veronica's body was found. So he was then charged with the murder of Veronica Abouchuk and the murder of Kathleen Jo Henry. However, there was also a third victim on the phone, pictures of a third person, which they could not identify. So they didn't charge him with a third murder. According to him, this third person, yes, he did hurt this person, but she wanted him to hurt her that badly. And she got up and walked out of his house with Alicia Youngblood. It was part of a sex thing with him and Alicia, and they left. They were fine. Nothing was wrong with him. And again, it was when his wife wasn't at home. So his wife is working and he's having all these things happening in her home that she doesn't even know about. Shocking and suspicious, to say the least. What a lot of people do is, once Brian was now arrested and the reality set in of, I am in very deep trouble, he retracted. He said, "Oh no, I was under duress. I just said what the police wanted me to say. They explained to me what was on the video. I would never do that." Again, they cut a piece of carpet in his home where Veronica Abouchuk's blood was in the carpet, because it was proven with DNA that that is her blood. How did the blood get in your house if you did not murder this woman? He again said, "No, it was Alicia and myself. We did this with this woman. She wanted us to, but she got up and walked out." Unless this man can see spirits and see spirits walk out, and he's maybe confusing bodies with spirits. I don't know what he saw, but he just completely went 180 degrees and said, no, I didn't kill anyone. They also tested the back of his truck. They found the DNA of Veronica there, but they found DNA of unknown people in the truck. So there are other people that we do not know of. Unfortunately, the poor jury that was selected for this case had to watch this video that this man made in the hotel, and he was sitting there just frowning. Some of the jury members had to get up and excuse themselves. There was one juror, as I understand, that said they can't take part anymore. It's horrifying. The people in the court couldn't see the footage, but they heard the audio, and it is really horrendous. So the trial went on, and unfortunately, Alicia Youngblood could not testify in the case. She did testify in a grand jury before the case, but Alicia Youngblood could not testify because she took her own life in 2021. I can only assume, and that's my own opinion, it's not fact, that meeting this demon was part of the reason that she could not face this life anymore, because it's enough what he did to her and told her what he did to other people. it is too much for any person to be able to handle. I said earlier that Stephanie Bisland really loved Brian. I really do think she loved him. I really do think that she was none the wiser of what this man was doing. Because when he was arrested, when he was in jail waiting for the trial, while he was on trial, she supported her husband. She went to visit him. She sat behind him in court. She was disgusted. She was shocked. It looks like it. But she just said that this is my husband and I promise to stand by him. Eventually, after the verdict, one of the two did file for divorce. She's a better person than me, I can just say that, because the Ian Calhoun situation, they found that there's a lot of messages between him and Brian Smith. There was a lot of protests about why was he not arrested, because there's clear evidence. There's a message where he says something about, I hoped the snow would cover my tracks. That's Ian. Something to that effect of his tracks being covered. So it sounds in the messages that he could have been involved in some way, but he was never charged. The third victim, the person that I told you about, that there was also pictures of her on the phone. The lady's name is Cassandra Boskowski. Cassandra's family believes that it's her on those pictures, and they want him to be charged with her murder as well, because she has disappeared off the face of the earth, and although there is no body yet, her badly damaged body was taken a picture of with his phone, where other dead women was also on, but he was never charged with that murder. You could see throughout the trial, this judge also, I think after this, he was like, I really regret my career choice. You cannot believe that these people walk among us. I want to actually just read to you what the judge had said. Judge Kevin Saxby said, there is no hope. There is no restoration. There is only prevention from Mr. Smith ever killing again. And while that is so true, it is also so sad, because Veronica Abouchuk's parents, children, family, Kathleen Jo Henry's family, children, they will never see them again. Even Cassandra Boskowski's family, they will have to live with the thought that their loved ones died in a horrendous way. Their last minutes was terrifying. The judge then sentenced him to 226 years for Brian Stephen Smith in the murders of Veronica Abouchuk and Kathleen Jo Henry. There were other related charges, but that was what he got in the end. 226 years in jail. And that is the actually not resolved case yet, because Ian Calhoun is still not held responsible and Cassandra Boskowski is still not found. But that is the case so far of Brian Stephen Smith. I hope that Cassandra's body is found and that Ian will come forward with the information that he's got, and that the families can get final information on what they require to heal from this tragedy. My questions in my mind is just, how can you live with someone and you don't even realize they do these things? It is just completely baffling me. I was trying to imagine what she must have thought. Maybe she had a thought. Maybe she just thought, oh, it's just easier to let him go. He was well known amongst the ladies of the night. Stephanie made a life choice that unfortunately impacted a lot of people around them and her. I don't think she would ever be able to trust anyone again. But I would like to thank you for your time. watching this video. I know it's very hard to listen to this, but I do think that it's important to know about these things. This is the first video in the series of South Africans committing crimes in other countries. I'm not going to do it in succession of each other, so let me know if there are cases that you are aware of South Africans committing crimes in other countries. I've got quite a lot on my list, but I would love to hear what your suggestions would be. I again want to thank everybody who have supported me so far, all the subscribers, all the likes, the comments, the emails, the messages. It really makes such a difference in my life. I hope that the channel will make a difference in your life. I hope to keep you informed, never to glorify any misdeeds, but to really inform you. Stay suspicious. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.